into teaching for another colleague,
Okay.
so unfortunately no.
Okay, that's fine. It's just to check who we're waiting for. With unfortunately Joni McGill from Goldsmiths is off ill today, but she's part of the team, as it were. And Lucy's now joining us from Coventry, Jane from Derby, Ed and Megan from Sheffield, and as I say, Joni is currently unwell. We're waiting for Faye from York St John. So we're a disparate group, which is fine. I didn't say desperate. Okay, so we just give it a minute. Okay, Faye's just sent an email. She's saying just finished a telephone conference call. She'll join us in a minute or two. So if we hang on for a minute or two until we get to the formal start time, which I've got 3 minutes, and then we'll get cracking.
Can I just check, is our webcam working? Can you see us, or are we just disembedded?
Oh, I can see you. Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, I can't see you, so I don't know what that says.
Oh well, I switched it off because nobody else is on. That's the only reason, Rob. Just look at your lovely face.
Oh dear. There you go. Get rid of that. Okay. Just give us a minute or two, and we'll wait for Faye. And if she's not here by 12, we'll kick off. Okay, folks. Faye will be with us, I think, hopefully quite shortly, from York St John. Just to say, well done to everybody that's made the technology work. That's the first thing. And the other thing, just to say, hi Jane, is that as we get going, we will mute the microphones from here, because when we pick up background noise, you're probably picking up a bit from where I am at the minute. It can be the microphones can be quite sensitive, but there are two facilities that we'll make use of, which is we'd like people just to talk a bit about what's happening in their place and what their interests are in this small but perfectly formed initiative, and also we've got the chat facility. Jane's just saying she can't see anyone. As long as you can hear us, Jane, that's good. You shouldn't be able to see me though. I've got my webcam on. Some people have webcams, some people may not. Either is fine. Lest you're worried that the slide you can see is the first of many. I think there are about 4 or 5 slides, and they're really just to give a focus for the discussion and see where we get to. So without more ado, maybe the sensible thing is to check all the microphones work okay, and just to ask people to introduce themselves. Jane is not sure about mic. Jane, do you want to say something to us, and we'll see whether we can hear that or not. No, Jane, if you said something to us, then we can't hear you. So you may need just to check the settings on the machine, and or make extensive use of the chat facility. Lucy, do you want just to say something to us so we know whether your mic is okay?
Hello, hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Lucy
okay?
calling from the West Midlands, giving her points. I feel like we're in the Eurovision.
Yeah. Yes, you can't vote for the West Midlands, of course.
No.
Okay, I certainly got that. Did everybody else get that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay.
I've got my
Megan,
camera on, but I don't think if anybody... I can see myself on the camera, which is a bit odd, and I can see you, Rob, but I can't see anybody else.
okay, your camera's not showing up as on. I think you may need to press it.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay, okay, that's
There we
fantastic.
go.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Welcome. Okay. Megan and Edward are sat somewhere where I think you've got a camera, but at the moment we can't see either of you, and it's up to you whether you want to. Sharon has now reappeared. Sharon has still got no mic for you.
I unmuted it because I was I printed out something, so I didn't want the noise to interfere with everybody.
Okay. So Sharon, just want to
Yes,
it's one half of the Sheffield team. Hi, Megan. Okay. That's grand. So far then, it's working fine, apart from for Jane, who needs to check, who's going to listen and type. That's okay. Right. I think then we should crack on. Let me just move things forwards a little bit in terms of what I think we're doing, and I put together some aims for what I thought we would focus on, but I think it's very much about finding what's important for us, really, and they are rather convoluted things, because one is about if there's anything happening with the HERE already in institutions, and in a minute I'm going to shut up and invite you to say just a little bit about what you're doing, if anything, and what your interests are. But there's really 3 bits in that first point for me. I mean, one is current practice, and there it's not necessarily the HERE itself, but also the data that's in the HERE and how that helps. And we're kind of interested in thinking about the HERE not just as a document, but actually as a data source which people can make use of for various purposes. In terms of materials, I've sent you a lot of stuff, and not done for this purpose, but it is available for reformulating and reusing, and maybe we can come back to that later on. I've still got to circulate the scenarios. Hello, Faye, if you can hear us. Just type something in the chat box to let us know you've arrived. And then really to think about what we want to do, and report back also to the HERE Advisory Committee. And there's a final bit which basically is about walking the walk as well as talking the talk, which is how are our universities using HERE data in those 2 areas, postgraduate applications and applications for employment for recent graduates, on the basis that if we're not using it, it's a bit difficult to expect other people to. And we suggested a strategy which is to invite people just to say a little bit on your interests, and maybe what we could do as we go through just a little bit from different people in turn is to invite you just to listen for areas where you're interested too. Where's the overlap in this? And perhaps jot things down in the chat window and think about whether there's some things we want to do together. And we'll come back to the resources in terms of whether they're useful or not at a later stage. And so that's almost all the planning. You've seen almost all the slides now, and if nobody has anything to say, the conversation will be quite a short one. But what I would suggest we do is just give people a chance to set the scene in terms of 5 minutes each on your interests, where it's come from, what you think needs to happen, and as I say, if we can kind of formulate some thinking around key issues, working together, but also sharing the outcomes of the thinking, the planning, and the actions we take, that would be brilliant. So I wonder if I can take chair's action and ask Ed and Megan to say a little bit about, because in a sense this initiative has come from an inquiry that you made to us, which I think you got in a Sheffield committee, which was around what's happening basically. And that went to the HERE advisory group, the national committee, and we've come back with this kind of bottom-up kind of approach. So if I've got that right, Ed and Megan, do you want to say a little bit about, perhaps the context and also what you think the interests need to be and what sort of things we need to be paying attention to?
Yep, that's fine. So we'll do a bit of a tag team. I'll stake out our position and then Megan will come in with our specific interest in this working.
Okay, fantastic.
So in terms of wider context, we've been involved with it here as not everybody does that, since 2010. But since that point, most of our interest, or most of our work has been on technical development, on pushing the idea of HERE as a formative document for students, but developing our 6.1 provision. So we feel like we're only just getting to the point where we can take stock and give focus to employer engagement, and the idea of the HERE as a document which can be used post-graduation. So it's at this point that we've decided we're going to take on this work because it's the only feasible window of time we've had so far to do so. And we clearly, like many of the people, or everybody presumably who's involved in this group, we feel that employer engagement is an area of potential benefit for students and employers. In terms of efficiency of confirming qualifications, improving application processes, especially ideas around using the kind of software providers who issue official HEREs to auto-fill kind of employer systems with student data, and then helping employers to choose the right graduates, distinguish between graduates, especially given that there's still a big kind of 2-1 band in degree classification systems. In terms of what we were hoping to focus on in Sheffield to help in this end, we're going to try and integrate some HERE questions into our Destination of Leavers survey for 2015-16 to identify case studies where students have used their HERE to secure graduate employment or further study, because we don't really have a great deal of detailed feedback despite our best efforts on that front. We're also, in terms of the provider we use, which is Digitree, hoping to work with them to improve reporting. It's a more granular level, so we can map out how many students are sharing their HERE, identifying which employees have been viewed HEREs through Digitree. And as you mentioned yourself, Rob, we recognise that both the university and the Students' Union employ a huge amount of graduates, and we have a whole wealth of graduate admissions tutors. So we think there's potential to build the HERE into our own recruitment processes, or certainly do better on that front. And in a sense, we propose we could be our own case study for this working group. And we'll meet with some of the higher-ups in our human resources department over the next couple of months to get the ball rolling in that area. And in reference to the July 2012 document which you circulated to us, the employers engaging the HERE research project, which included a series of questions for employers, we propose adapting or using those as a basis for our, I suppose, our liaison with our own human resources department to push the idea of the here as something that we can use in our own institution. And then within academic departments, many of the larger ones have specific career liaison officers. So we would propose also working in closer liaison with those people to sort of embed awareness of the career and its employability, potential employability benefits to students at a more local departmental level.
And then in terms of our interests, we tried to sort of frame these as 3 questions, which are: which recruiters and graduate admissions departments are currently using or considering using here as part of their recruitment or admissions processes, and how are they using it? The second question is there a correlation between having it here and securing graduate employment or access to further study? And our third question is, to what extent does the success of the here generally or widely depend upon widespread employer engagement for you?
So in that sense, will the here be deemed to have failed as a document if the employer benefits are not realised, I suppose?
Okay. Fantastic. That's a 10-year project you've got there, at least. But I mean, quite often when you do this sort of thing in a group and you get to the 4th or 5th person, they say, well, I think everybody said it all. And it's quite difficult to do these sort of round, feedback things. But actually, it would be interesting to know as we go around whether there are things in what you've said that are of interest to other people as well. Because I've got a couple of things just to respond to, and then other people might want just to say a few words before we move on. But I think there was, and you will be able to correct me, an inquiry in one of your career liaison groups, career service board, something like that, because I think Francine or maybe Steve Fish, when he was with you, mentioned it, and that was from Santander. So there is also some employer interest in what's happening.
Yes, I think that is right, and we've just yet not been able to take any progress make any progress on that. But yes, certainly, because Santander they offer employer awards through PTS, so we have an established link with them. Yeah,
and they're certainly interested. It's interesting that getting any feedback from employers about what's happening is really quite helpful, particularly a large and engaged employer like Santander. The other thing is, in case people don't know, and Lucy, this may be potentially relevant to yourself, we have got a demonstrator which looks at how to autofill graduate application systems with HERE data, which was done by Digitree, which is the organisation, the third-party provider that Megan and Ebert are using at Sheffield, but also with an organisation called GradWeb, who do one of the applicant tracking system providers, and I will send a link round to that. It's a bit like the first Wright brothers aeroplane, and then it will hop off the ground for a little while. But it gives you an idea of how feasible it is to take material from a HERE and use it to populate a graduate application system. I think Megan and Ebert are familiar with it, but I'll send the link round. It's in Dropbox. Okay, is there anything, Sharon, do you want to say anything about just what you've heard in that, or Lucy as well? I think Faye is around somewhere, but not on the screen currently. You need to unmute your mic, Sharon.
Okay, I'm unmuted. So I'm really envious of all the stuff that you're proposing to do in your group, because Ulster, we have not got anywhere in that kind of direction or engagement with the HERE. We're slightly different in relation to DALE, which is our Department of Employment and Learning, has made the mandate that all further and higher education institutions in the north have to have a HERE by 2018. they've given further education institutions slightly longer because they recognise it might take them a wee bit longer to get engaged with it. But at Ulster, we're the ones that kind of have been leading the way in that. We were a bit like yourselves in relation to it's taken us a long time to get the technology up and going, and we've been very much engaged with trying to get that right. And we had an in-house solution for the HEAR, but we've now gone with Grad Intel to actually host this platform now from last year, from July last year. In the version of the HEAR we had last year, we made the decision that we weren't going to engage employers initially because we had nothing in the HEAR really. When we first launched it, the in-house HEAR, there was very little there outside of the 4.1. When we got our first version of our HEAR last year in July, we had some modules in it in the 6.1 section, and we had our year-long placement in it as well, and we had a generic statement about what the Edge Award was, and that's the only extra activity that was there outside of section 4.1. So we thought, what's the point in engaging employers and something like that? They're not going to see any real value in it. This year we're a wee bit better as when we released our HEAR in July, officially with Grad Intel this year. We actually had the 6.1 part of it actually had a detailed list of all the different activities for our employability award, which is called the Edge Award. So instead of just having the generic statement, we had a little bit of an intro, and then we listed all those different activities. So if any student engaged in this, it actually looked a little bit more substantive. Because we have a little bit more information there, we want to now try to get engaged with employers and make them realise the value of what we have in the 6.1. And to that end, DEL, which is our Department of Employment and Learning, we have a working group in Ulster called the HEAR Implementation Working Group or something like that. And our chair actually has made a presentation to the HEAR, about the HEAR to DEL, and it was to all the other institutions in the north of Ireland in relation to show them how far we've done and what the processes were and our difficulties, and they have been many. I tell you, they have been many, and I'm sure you have that pain as well in relation to trying to establish it and get it working, and we've had a number of resourcing issues as well. So we're not even as far on as we wanted to. We wanted things like departmental prizes and various other things like this engaged in the put in 6.1, and we still haven't managed that yet because of the resourcing issues. It's never going to be, and I can't see it because we've signed off the project on the HEAR because we've officially released our first HEAR through Grad Intel. The HEAR working group doesn't exist anymore. We now have a management group which maintains the HEAR, so we will have a little bit more information in it, but it's never going to get as detailed as we want it to. The resource that we had, unfortunately, they're no longer seconded to the project, so it's a little bit of goodwill is involved in this, and so at the moment we're trying to look at what is the best way that we could show that it's an added value for employers, and we're trying to find out ideas about it. We're a bit like yourselves, we've been involved with bigger employers like Santander and so forth because we have the Santander internships and so forth. But because we haven't had anything really to show about the HEAR, we haven't engaged employers, and that's we're wanting to learn from others on how they've engaged with it. We're particularly in Northern Ireland, we have a lot of SMEs, and we're wondering how the SMEs actually will take the HEAR and take to it as opposed to the typical CVs, and whether they would have the technology involved even to autofill applications or anything, and whether that's just going to strictly be for larger institutions like Santander who do that. And we're a bit concerned that they may not engage with the HEAR at all because of that, and we have definitely a lot of employers that would still use CVs, and even when they do the online applications it's very much that. And when we have been advertising, or I have been raising awareness about our employability award. We're always saying to employers, we're starting to say to employers, it's now on section 6.1 of the HERE. It's verified activity. All the activities are verified by Ulster. We're signing it off and saying, yes, these students have done this part-time job. Yes, these students have done this volunteering. Yes, these students have done X, Y, and Z. And there's starting to be a little bit more interest in relation to that. But we're very much in our infancy in relation to engaging with employers. And we'd be very, very willing to engage in any strategies that you have and think that, well, actually there's something that Ulster is doing, that maybe Sheffield is doing, or another institution is doing, in order to replicate, instead of replicating effort, need to share a bit of practice there. Because we're very much at the starting blocks in relation to this. And we're a bit afraid our employers are going to be switched off with it in relation to what their engagement with it if they just see it as a flat document. We have about 40% of our students at the minute have opened or registered with Grad Intel. It's only open, our HERE now is only open to full-time undergraduate students. We would in the future like it to be open to part-time, but at the moment we're still trying to get the process right and trying to pull the information into the HERE correctly. And that's an ongoing issue with our resources. So we're a bit limited there. So it's not equal across every section of our students. And that can be an issue too. And that has been an issue, I think. So if there's any help that we can do, or if there's anything that you'd like to get engaged in, we'd be very keen to try to draw on that, I think that's, could everybody follow me, because I know I talk very fast sometimes and I don't realise. I can be like as though I'm on caffeine 24/7 when I talk sometimes. So if you can follow me, all right, that's grand. If anybody's any questions.
Thanks for that, Sharon. We're getting quite a bit of feedback from other conversations nearby, I think, okay, which have now stopped, which is great. How odd is that? Okay, so Jane's giving you a thumbs up on that one. So there are some areas, I guess, of overlap. Just to summarise, I mean, clearly we've got the Santander connection and the employer awareness generally connection that Megan and Edward were sort of pointing up to. I just want to sort of note three things really, one of which is an advert, for which I apologise in advance. First of all, in the information that we sent out, there is an information sheet about SMEs. So maybe just that might be a useful thing to have a look at. It's not going to be perfect. It may not even be relevant, but it does represent some work from what we did earlier with SMEs. And just as Megan and Edward were saying, they want to use the questions that we use with employers for internal purposes, that's great. There's the issue about, there's another issue, I guess, about getting feedback. Megan and Edward were talking about getting feedback from Digitry. It'd be good to get feedback from Grad Intel in terms of who uses what. And last but not least, in terms of SMEs, Martin Edmondson, that runs GradCore, which is a social enterprise recruitment agency in the Northwest, is actually presenting at the next HERE national seminar, which is at the University of York on the 26th of April. And he's going to do a presentation and a workshop, and the focus of his workshop will be how we get SMEs to engage with the HERE. So that's the plug. I'm sorry about that, but there you go. I think it's relevant. Okay, thank you, Sharon. Which I should have said we're recording this conversation, and what we'll try and do perhaps is pull things together as a consequence. It won't be for a week or two because I'm away next week, but we'll try and do that. Lucy, do you want to say a bit about the position at Coventry? Because you're very much in development, I know, because we're working with you on HERE Academy with Adam and co. And we've talked a little bit about large employers, including in engineering. Obviously, you've got Jaguar Land Rover, which apparently I'm not allowed to call JLR, and others as well. So, do you want to say a bit about it? How, what's important to you in this, really?
Okay. Yes. Thanks very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. We're very much still in a stage of development at Coventry in terms of here and looking at what, in some senses, what other institutions have done with here, what's worked well, what hasn't. We've looked at a range of providers, and we're currently still sort of going through that process and looking at an in-house option is one of the things that we're currently considering. We've got a working group, a here task force, which we've got stakeholders from across the university, and we've split out the different themes and areas that we need to consider in order to move it forward for us as an institution and as a university group as well, because we've got quite a few other subsidiaries and various different areas of business. So we're very much in the infancy. In fact, I'm not even sure if we can call it infancy. It's really just kind of getting started. But one of the things that's come up that I've said that I will kind of lead on and take forward is this concept of employers and how did they interact with here. So I was really interested, Megan and Edward, what you said about some of the questions that you had in terms of employers, and these very much resonate with us and what we're interested in. I think you said you know, which recruiters are currently using the here and how, you know, is there a correlation between having here and grad recruitment and further study? So one of the issues that came up for us was whether, you know, there's such a littered playing field really in terms of how people recruit at the moment, you know, the different methods, the different types of you know, recruitment materials and recruitment processes that they will use. One of the concerns for us was whether or not this would add another layer of complication, and necessarily whether we wouldn't want to have something that would be perhaps perceived in a negative sense, but more in an additional sense, more of a glass half full. It's something else that they get that's really going to add value to that recruitment experience and understanding of those graduates. So it's what we'd really like to help facilitate in any way that we can is to see really what do employers want from here. How could we, you know, is there any way of knowing, do they see it as useful in its current format? If not, is there a way of adapting it in certain ways, or utilising the process with employers so that they feel more as part of the locus of control is with them rather than us? We won't want it to be something where we feel that we're doing it to them and forcing them to use something. More as the fact that they're actually in control of the process and can guide the process in some way. So very much interested in that, and in terms of what Sharon was saying around SMEs and different types of employers, we've got a really quite complex employment recruitment kind of market within Coventry in terms of what our graduates will go on and do. We have a large proportion of SMEs, but we also have students that go into international destinations and a lot of big companies in the area, but also UK-wide. So again, how flexible is here and how adaptable is it in order to speak to the needs of those different types of employers in that range of different sectors? How meaningful is it to them? You know, is a real kind of a burning issue for us. So that we can, as I say, how could we work with them better? How could we understand them better? How could we move it forward better for employers? That then it's going to have a better positive impact on our graduates, which is really, I guess, what we're all kind of working towards, to make the experience better for students and then as graduates within that employment market. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I guess those are our key kind of considerations. And I suppose because we haven't adopted it yet, because we're kind of still in that investigative stage, I think there's a very, very strong likelihood that we will go ahead. But how can we launch it in a way that's effective and most effective for students and for employers to get behind it almost from the start rather than a bit later on.
Fantastic, thanks Lucy. I mean, a couple of things there that might just be worth mentioning, but take your point. I mean, it seems to me there's lots of overlaps now emerging. There's the diversity of the graduate labour market. There's there's the common questions or the shared questions that we might be able to coalesce around. In terms of employer engagement, there's quite an early recording made by the University of Gloucester who talked about convening employer stakeholder groups and the feedback they got, and I will make the link to that available. And I think the other thing you've just reminded me of is the different scenarios for HERE use, and I think we've got 8 now, ranging from some very traditional ones through to somewhere we try and embed HERE in all sorts of other things like LinkedIn profiles. So they become part and parcel of what, of students' ways of operating and employers' ways of operating. So that's the job that I need to do, is to get that out. Some people have seen the early versions of that before, but it's a question of moving it on a little bit, I think, in terms of those additional possibilities. So one isn't trying to see the HERE as something different. It's part and parcel of what students have in their armoury and what employers can use. In a funny kind of way, you want to make it available without people having to see an additional document and think, oh, it's more complicated, it doesn't work, it doesn't fit our requirements, and hopefully we're getting towards that kind of stage. So that's something I need to do. Does anybody else want to pick up anything that Lucy was just talking about there and respond, or then perhaps we'll ask Faye to say a little bit, and if Jane can, she will as well. So, anybody want to come back on Lucy's points, or?
Not as in disagreeing with anything that Lucy said. I pretty much agree with all her points in relation to what we want to try to gain from our engagement with our employers. I think it's a very complex area, and we have to be very careful because we push employers with so many different things already, and we're trying to get employers to take our graduates on and to engage with the university, and we're trying to get them into employer liaison panels, and like with the employability board I run, for example, I try to get them involved in that and those employer-led panels and so forth. So it's trying to ensure that we're selling it not as something additional that's going to be harder work for them or make their recruitment process harder, but make it an easier thing, or it's the added values, trying to get them persuaded about the added value in relation to that. But also there's a selling thing as well here for our students in relation to our students recognising the value of the HERE and our academics and so forth as well. And it's at Ulster in particular, it's taken a little bit of time to get selling the formative value of using the HERE through studies advice sessions and so forth, so that academics recognise the value of what's happening. And I think one of the ways we're trying to sell that is because of the employability award that we have, and it's because it's set in section 6.1 of the award, and a lot of our academics put activities towards that. That's one way we're trying to hook staff into engaging with it, and even talking to some employers in relation to there's some activities that they can get onto section 6.1. But yeah, I agree with everything that Lucy said.
Thanks very much, Sharon. That's great. Yes, I think it's also worth just saying that I'm now really sorry that Joni McGill from Goldsmiths isn't here, because a lot of their effort has gone into engaging students from day one, and they're therefore thinking about how that engagement can be turned into something that students can make use of as they come to apply for future opportunities, be those postgraduate or with employers, and of course they're a particular kind of institution as well. Okay, Faye, I don't know whether you can A, hear us okay, and B, speak to us. And if you can, if you want to say anything about the position at York St John, that would be great. We'll try and do the same thing with Jane in a minute. So I'm going to turn my microphone off and see if Faye can say anything to us, and I'll get the prayer mat out just to give that a sporting chat. Okay, Faith, you're talking to us. I can't hear you. That's so much for the power of prayer, colleagues. Okay, and Jane can't hear you either. Okay, Faye, if you can hear us, if you want to chat, okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. This is Jane. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Hello, Jane. Yeah, we can hear you. Fantastic.
It's suddenly working again. Sorry about that. I thought it wasn't going to work.
Okay. If you'd like to, Lucy gave us the verdict from the West Midlands. If you'd like to give us the results of the jury for Eurovision in the East Midlands, in terms of what your interest is, because you've actually done some work in this area for the Academy, I know. We know. But tell us how things are looking from your perspective.
Okay. Although I work for the University of Derby, I can't really comment on what Derby is doing as an institution. I sort of chipped into this a little bit late, didn't I, Rob? So apologies for that. I can't really update you on our own institution, but I can explain that I work for a research team called the International Centre for Guidance Studies now, but while I was in my previous job, which was at HEXU, we did undertake a little bit of work for the Academy on the HERE, and sadly, as you would probably expect, we didn't get very many employers to contribute to that piece of research, and the ones that did hadn't heard of HERE, so we weren't really able to offer any particularly interesting insights there at that stage, but I remain very interested to find out more about what employers might do with HERE, and I suppose my interest in this webinar really is whether or not there's any research that we could do that would help, really, because we're always interested in identifying projects that are helpful. My sense of employers from doing the work we did with BIS last year, and also I have quite strong contacts with AGR, the Association of Graduate Recruiters, is that there are two major issues for us, really. One is that many employers who are aware of HERE, the larger companies, seem to be saying to us that until all the universities are on board with it, it's very difficult to use it in the recruitment process because you don't want to privilege applicants with HERE over applicants without HERE. And so some of the ones who've thought about it have thought that, you know, when it's a universal kind of thing, then they're more likely to engage with it, which is a real problem. But of the smaller employers, particularly, that I can remember talking to, again mentioning HERE, I think there's some interest in it, but it's not necessarily that they would necessarily want to read the HEREs. I think what I'm picking up from them is that the value of the HERE lies in the capacity it provides for students to be able to articulate their learning, and they're really interested in that. They want applicants to articulate their learning, and you know, that's a really serious issue, that they're continually saying that we need people to be able to speak well at interviews, understand what they've learned, explain how their learning contributes to the job and the company and so forth. And the HERE very much promotes that, and I think they can see it. They can see that very well. So there you are. My interest in this is research-led, and some of the my home telephone's ringing now, so I'm going to have to go and answer that, I think, if that helps to start things off. But I'll certainly circulate the report from that we did from BIS last year.
Yeah, that's great, and you got some positive feedback on that from sure. Yeah, in terms of being a document for students, and I think that would be good to talk to Joni about how, in a sense, we need to think about students as not quite HERE advocates, but as HERE data users. in terms of applications to employers. That's really helpful from Jane. It sounds like Faye is nearby but not with us. So I think probably Joni not being here, we've gone as far as we can in terms of the updating stuff. Maybe what we ought to do now is just spend a minute or two thinking about those other questions, certainly the top two questions on the screen, which is, do we want to pick out collectively some key issues which are not so overwhelming that we're not going to get anything done, but are areas that we can focus things around with a view to being able to say something, because we're actually quite a powerful group in the sense that we represent different parts of the sector, different parts geographically, and we've got a shared interest which the evidence that Jane picked up is fairly clearly reflected in a number of places, which is employers either don't know about the HERE, or they say, well, unless everybody does it, we can't use it, which is not true, because it's not true really, because nobody does everything. And the other thing, though, that I think is important to put alongside that is the employers consistently saying, we don't want simply to recruit on degree results or academic performance. We're recruiting people, not qualifications, which takes you to that second bit, which is how do we get students to articulate the range of experiences and learning. And it's often that co-curricular, extracurricular dimensions, those dimensions that come through the EDGE Award, that come through the Sheffield Graduate Award, the HERE entries, Section 6, that give students the chance to do that. So I think there's both elements around. I mean, the HERE, they're saying we don't know too much about the HERE, we're not sure how we can use it, but we really want to know about the sort of richer picture of a graduate. And when we did the work with employers, we said all the educationally interesting stuff, and when we got to the bit where we said you can, which is where Edward and Megan started, you can check qualifications by using the HERE. You can prove the student is who they say they are and they've got these results. Employers eyes lit up because that will save them some money. That's not my first port of call, but I understand how important it is. So, I mean, colleagues, do we want to make a stab at just saying, well, based on what we've heard, there are some areas that, we would want to focus around. And I'm conscious about people having different perspectives, different starting points, but nevertheless, it would be good if we can agree, I think, on some areas that would be common ground, even if it's only we agree we're going to do something, some kind of survey work of employers that we know about, and report back on the results, because that would ground it in a way. Jane's research is national, this would be local, but I'll shut up, and based on what you've heard, all being good listeners and all, if we can identify 2 or 3 areas that would give us a focus, which people might tackle in their own ways, that would be really helpful, I think. And pulling that data back together would also be really helpful. So I'll shut up and see what you think.
Can I just chip in one quick comment about that research that we did for the Academy? I understand that it's not going to be published in its entirety, but Doug Cole, sorry, has told me that what the Academy is looking at doing is selecting out little extracts from it. So that might actually see the light of day in a small way. But I think one of the reasons why they didn't want to publish it is because there isn't anything positive to say about employers. So in a way, I guess that the Academy in its widest sense would probably be very interested in any good news stories about employers engaging with the HERE, because that would help people see ways forward. If that makes it sound as though I'm trying to bias any kind of research we might do. I'm not really, but certainly people seem to be looking at wanting examples of case studies to illustrate what can happen, rather than going over all ground about why people aren't involved with it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it absolutely does. And I think the notion, I think we're really talking about some actions that will lead to some interesting information. So I think it is about doing stuff on the ground, which we started out with Megan Edwards' plan, but other people's plans as well, in terms of engaging employers, maybe engaging students to engage employers as well, and engaging postgraduate tutors and so on, which colleagues talked about. Yeah, maybe people doing some of that stuff, and if there are some common reference points, yes, there could be some SME focus if that's what people wanted to do. It's an interesting one, isn't it? The SMEs are the most important group, but they don't get in the papers very often, whereas the AGR, who recruit a smaller proportion of our graduates, are quite often in the press. So it's about how you set the climate, really. Some institutions pay attention to some messages more than others, but okay, I'll shut up, and if people want to just say, you know, what are the priorities for you in terms of moving things on now, which you think other people share based on what we've heard?
I think at Ulster one of our priorities is actually raising awareness of what exactly it is with employers, because we really haven't done that. It's been very piecemeal, and it's only when students are talking about the H word, if I'm being honest. So there hasn't been a consistent message going out there regarding employers at all. So we're very much going from the from the starting blocks, really, in relation to selling it to employers, and want to know the best way of doing that, or the most effective way of doing that, and learning from other people's practice, because we know it all depends on the big sell and who you're talking to in relation to that, you know, because we've had a bit of a hard sell in relation to talking about the Edge Award initially, and we're only starting to gather a little bit of momentum in relation to that award, and then we're kind of sneaking in the back door about the here, you know, this also appears on our here and so forth. But again, there isn't any major awareness about the here at all with the employers that we engage with. So for us, you know, that would be one of our priorities.
Thanks very much, Sharon. People associate with that? I mean, is awareness an important dimension?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, very much.
I think yeah.
Sorry, Megan.
Hello. Sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Can you hear? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Sorry, I don't. I can't hear when I'm speaking when somebody else isn't speaking, so I'm trying to not to speak. But sorry if I have. I would just say I agree in terms of awareness raising. I wondered if maybe with something like the issue that came up perhaps with employers feeling uncomfortable in big employers, or we can't take it on if if everybody isn't using it. Maybe that could be circumvented slightly by using a group of SMEs, because we could actually then do a little bit of a case study or mini kind of process with them, and sort of go through from sort of onboarding and inception to sort of post-evaluation. So we could then prove the value of something by working with maybe a bit more of a flexible group in terms of their recruitment processes. So if you wanted some good news stories, that could be a bit more of a quick win, possibly. But yeah, certainly from Coventry perspective, awareness raising would be very useful, particularly given the stage that we're at, which is, as I said, it's sort of right at the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
From Sheffield's point of view, I think our proposal, if it's agreeable to the group, would be to use ourselves as a case study of the university as an employer.
Yes.
But also, I think we'll probably follow up on the Santander lead as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there's feedback. I'm getting an awful lot of feedback when Megan and Edward are talking, and I can't make out sometimes what you're saying. I'm sorry, I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that issue. so I can't always hear. I'm sorry, could you repeat your points again?
Yes, we said that we would probably use ourselves as a case study, as using the university as an employer to scope out how the university HR might use the HERE, but also follow the leads of Santander. As Rob mentioned earlier, they'd expressed an interest via our careers advisory board. So we need to follow that up, I think.
So that would be, in a sense, an employer engaging with a particular large employer to see what they thought the potential was.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, it sounds like we have a range of possibilities which are to do with awareness raising in three contexts. One is the SME focus. The second is the university as an employer, and the third is Santander or any other large employers that people have access to, but using them as single case studies almost. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm giving you feedback now as well. So. Okay, there are some questions in the resources which are around working with employers, which Megan and Edward mentioned that it would be useful to see if any of those would fit the bill across the piece, because if we use similar questions, we can actually build the picture together. I think the scenarios data would be quite useful to have, because it kind of points at different ways that HERE might be useful in different circumstances. So I will circulate that to people. And Jane is putting a point about the HERE as a pre-graduation issue, I guess, or employment issue about internships or work placements. So that might be an area we could kind of build in to our thinking. But the focus is on awareness. Awareness of what people can do and what they might want to do. Okay. Have we missed anything out? Okay. People are shaking their heads, and that's probably because they want some lunch. Just to note that the resources have a range of, that we sent to you, have a range of things in. There's some informational things. There are some which Edward and Megan have picked up about inquiry, very much the raising awareness agenda in that, questions to ask, questions which could be modified in the questions we asked. And then there are some which are around actions, particularly the HERE action list stuff. There are some webinars that we've had previously, and we can make those available because some of those will touch on this world, and I'm very happy to do that, as well as recirculating the scenarios. Are people happy to work on this in a collaborative way? Because if so, we'll set up a little JISC list so people can swap information about, another JISC list so that people can swap information about. Okay, but it will be a closed list, just for us list. I've got the Santander contact person. If you haven't got it, Megan and Ed, you probably have.
I'm not sure we do, actually.
I don't.
No.
Okay, I'll dig it out for you. It's and we have also a number of other people who've expressed interest in the employer contact from the employer side, but maybe we ought to hone some stuff first before we go to a wider list. Okay, is that okay with folks?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make the recording of this available if you want to come back and say, did I really say that? We'll maybe do a limited half-page digest of the things we've sort of said we would have a bash at. If you're thinking of coming to the 26th event at York, 26th of April event, I think we should have a workshop session around this to see what other people think, just as part of the programme. And just to let them know, A, this is happening, because I think it's a big gap, and I think for some students and for some academics, employer interests will be really important. And conversely, for some people that don't want to do the here, perceived lack of employer interest is, is very important as well, because they can say, well, nobody's interested in this, so why should I be? So it's both a drag on the system and it's an incentive. So I would think if we were interested in doing something which just alerts people to what's going on, then we should do that. And just also to point out, which has also come up in the conversation last year, at the equivalent event in Manchester, we did a workshop with Abate, and their key feedback was we have to get our academics to sell it to the employers, because they spend quite a bit of time, particularly in vocational programs, working with employers directly. So it's not just us, it's not just careers, it's not just students, it's academics as well. And I think Lucy touched on that earlier on, the importance of the academics. Have I missed anything out from that very rambly summary, which wasn't a summary at all?
No, I think that's comprehensive.
No, that seems grand. Rob, I just mentioned a point there about, you talked earlier about LinkedIn profiles.
Yes, yes, I was just going to pick that up. Yeah. Okay. It's a work in progress in two ways. There's two actions. We're having some discussions with LinkedIn about how feasible it is, whilst maintaining a degree of security, because registrars will not want things appearing in LinkedIn profiles in anything other than secure ways. And so there's a route for having a conversation with LinkedIn about that, but we're also talking to colleagues at Abate, because Abate have embedded open badges in their here, and the question is whether you can embed the here in an open badge. And if you can, there are various security protocols which come with badges in certain circumstances, which make them effectively like an Apple phone. You can't get into them. So hopefully we'll have something to say about that at the York meeting, if not before, but it's certainly one of the scenarios, because it has the advantage of just making here data just part of what's out there. You don't have to do anything. People can use the data without it being part of an extra thing, if you like. And that gets us off this thing with employers shouting about, or not more complication, not another thing to think about, not another document to read. It's part and parcel of what's there. But so hopefully more on that would be available. And given the number of employers that are around in this kind of territory, and using LinkedIn as part of their recruitment strategies. And we're having an event at Abate in a couple of weeks where enterprise are going to talk about how they use social media as part of their recruitment strategies. Then it's really important to embed what we're doing, I think, in what employers do, rather than try and create new things. Okay, LinkedIn discussion group will be another option, Lucy. Yeah, we can certainly look at that. Yeah, make a note of that one too. Okay. Anything else, folks? Given that we've got 1 whole minute left on my clock.
I just put a comment in that might be of interest about badges.
Yes.
I've heard of this initiative about LinkedIn and badges and so on, and I think I've heard also some rumbles from career service colleagues about worrying about how the employers use it for searching, but there's an ethical dimension, perhaps, that needs to be considered as well as the practical, technical dimension.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and I think part of that we'll be talking to some students at Abate in that event about. Abate has a course called Ethical Hacking, which trains computer-based students to work in ethical frameworks to support computer companies in making their systems hacking proof. And this is a slightly different issue, but it's got the ethical dimension. But yes, we need to be careful. Having said that, if we're embedding the here as the here in a LinkedIn profile, then what you would get in a sense is a university signed off record that the student will have seen and presumably will have the choice of putting in or not.
Yeah.
I think the problem's going to come where other people make stuff available, perhaps without a student's permission, and at the end of the day, Bob Burgess has always been very clear that the data is owned by the student but stewarded by the university, and therefore it's up to the student to provide access to their HEREs for employers. It doesn't happen otherwise. But no, that's a good point, Jane, thank you. Colleagues, I think we should have another call at some point in maybe about 6 weeks, which will remind us all what we haven't done when we get the message in 5 weeks, and we'll all go and do some stuff. That's normally how it works. And we will set something up to that effect, and hopefully at that point Joni will be able to join us, and also Faye may be able to make a contribution too. I think the technology's done great though, so thank you all very much. You've all done great, really, is what I meant to say. Technology worked. Thanks very much. Have a good weekend, and we'll get something out which will follow this up in the next 7 days.